Hello there, my name is Jim Newell. I was the Rejoin EU party candidate at the Stretford and Urmston by-election that was held on the 15th of December. I'd like to thank everybody who voted for me. We got 237 votes, which wasn't bad. It was 1.3% of the vote. It represents a start. It's a base on which we can build. This was the first time that I had stood in an election, so I feel that I've learned a great deal from the experience, and I certainly don't want to turn my back on that experience and let it go to waste, but on the contrary, to use it to build on it going forward in order to develop the campaign to rejoin the EU and the campaign in favour of other progressive causes still further, because I firmly believe that it's not possible to have a progressive outlook on politics. It's not possible to be on the left in politics while not also being in favour of rejoining the EU. So I learned a great deal from the campaign, and as I say, I want to build on that. One of the things I learned was the campaign that is currently being conducted against the Labour Party's plans to concrete over Carrington Moss. A disgraceful set of plans which they had promised that they would not carry forward, but now are doing so. These campaigns to develop the land for housing and commercial developments fly in the face of climate change targets. They're completely detrimental to natural habitats and completely detrimental to local amenities enjoyed not only by local residents but also by the masses of visitors that go there every year. I do not believe that the plans would have been possible had we still been members of the EU, as they would not have been compatible with EU legislation on climate change and protection of the environment. So I would like going forward to become more closely involved in the campaign being spearheaded by the campaign by the Friends of Carrington Moss against the plans to concrete over the land there. I take the point that land is needed for the development of housing, which is in very short supply, something that particularly affects young people. Young people have a very difficult time in the present circumstances, far more than was the case for young people when I was of the same age as young people are today. So I take that point. The Friends of Carrington Moss, however, have pointed out that there are many brownfield sites available for housing development. They also point out that the plans include the development of a road, and yet we know from years of research that all the building of roads does is to, far from bringing about traffic calming, they increase the volume of traffic present in an area, so they're totally counterproductive. So that's one thing I've learned from the campaign. The other thing I've learned from the campaign is how far to the right the Labour Party's moved since Keir Starmer became leader of the party, symbolised by the party's now very nationalistic messaging, something that was apparent from the leaflets that were distributed on behalf of Andrew Weston, the Labour Party candidate, something that's apparent from Ed Miliband's Twitter account with its Union Jack prominently displayed, something that had already been evident some years ago in the 2015 election when the Labour Party distributed commemoration mugs boasting about how it would tighten immigration controls. I've learnt also that the Labour Party's policy of make Brexit work as a political tactic, I've come to believe, is particularly useless. It's rather useless, I think, because it's one of those attempts to please everybody, which will end up pleasing nobody. I can't believe, given Starmer's past position on Brexit, that it will actually convince many in the right-wing press, the Conservative Party, Leavers, that he's actually sincere in his position. So, as a political tactic to attract them or keep them on side, I can't see it working. And of course, it's not going to be not going to make Remainers particularly happy either. So it sort of reminds me of the position the Labour Party took in the 2019 general election. You may remember that. This was the election at which Labour attempted to please everybody and ended up pleasing nobody by saying that it would renegotiate Theresa May's withdrawal agreement and then put it to a second referendum in which the two options would be either its renegotiated agreement or remaining in the EU. Jeremy Corbyn was then asked which of those two options he would campaign for in such a referendum, and he completely refused to be drawn, a position that just was not at all credible for somebody who was campaigning to be a Prime Minister. I mean, how can you campaign for people's votes and then completely be unwilling to give any indication of what you would offer those people whose votes you're campaigning for on such an important issue as being in the European Union or outside it. It just wasn't credible for a person campaigning to be Prime Minister. So it seems to me that the Labour Party is presumably adopting its position because it hopes thereby that it can keep people who are opposed to the European Union, people who voted Leave, hopes that it can keep them on side. Even if it works, given that Brexit is proving such a disaster, small businesses are suffering, in particular the enormous amount of red tape that's now involved in trying to export to the UK's largest export markets. The average price of the household food bill in 2021 increased by £210. Brexit has led to labour shortages in many areas, including the National Health Service, and so one could go on and on and on. Brexit is proving a particular disaster, and it seems to me that political parties have a responsibility not only to represent public opinion but to lead it, and that Keir Starmer, in refusing to acknowledge that Brexit has been a disaster and it cannot work, that the idea of making it work is a complete fantasy, is evading his responsibilities as a party leader. And so going forward, it seems to me that what is required is to campaign against the Labour Party from a progressive position, to keep making the point that if you're on the left in politics, loyalty to Starmer and the Labour Party merely frees his hands to keep on shafting you time after time after time. I would love to know how people in the various pressure groups that make up the Rejoin movement, by which I mean Best for Britain, the European movement, and all these other pressure groups, how they believe that it is possible to bring about an increasing closeness to the European Union while refusing to back the Rejoin EU party candidates in elections, and refusing to back that as a strategy for getting Britain back into the European Union. Because the three main parties don't have rejoining the EU as their policy positions. So if you say that you are in favour of a closer relationship with the European Union, but are not prepared really to fight for it in terms of backing Rejoin EU party candidates, then either, logically, there are only two possibilities. Either you don't really believe, you're not really in favour of rejoining the EU, or you are in favour of it, but you don't believe that that is the best strategy for bringing it about. But if that is the case, then what is the alternative that you have to offer, given that none of the three main parties have rejoining the EU as their policy? There are masses of people out there who entertain the idea that removing the Tories from office, voting for the Labour Party, will bring about a closer relationship with the European Union. That somehow Keir Starmer doesn't really believe in this make Brexit work position. But I don't really buy that analysis, because if you believe that line of thinking, then you are taking a position which assumes that Starmer will do something that is in reality very, very undemocratic. In other words, to campaign for election on a given position and then not actually deliver it once he achieves office. So if he does that, then what does that say about the quality of democracy? That our party leaders would campaign for positions and then, having won people's votes on that basis, not actually deliver on what their people had actually voted for. It doesn't make sense. So it seems to me that if you are on the left in politics, if you have a progressive outlook, if you believe, as I do, that it's not possible really to address the most pressing issues of our time without international cooperation, if you believe that being on the left entails being an internationalist, and therefore that it's not possible to be on the left without being in favour of rejoining the European Union, the only alternative is to rebel against the Labour Party, to make clear that your loyalty cannot be counted upon, and in that way to build the pressure that is necessary to ensure that we can rejoin the European Union as soon as possible. And so going forward, that is what I will be doing. That is how I will be campaigning. That is the position I will be taking. And while I think that it may be difficult, it may be hard going initially, because there is a very strong political tide against the Conservative Party at the moment. The wind is blowing very strongly in favour of the Labour Party. There are many people out there who are convinced that we have to get rid of the Tories at all costs, which is certainly true, and that involves supporting the Labour Party, whatever reactionary policies it puts forward. So that will make our task difficult to begin with. But going forward, I'm absolutely convinced that the political wind will blow our way, and that things will get better for us on the progressive side of politics, and for those who are in favour of rejoining the EU. Thanks very much for listening, and I wish you all a very happy new year.